This is a game where players are going to be playing as various mollies. And I wasn't familiar with this term, but I think it's used to reference someone who is interested in things like drag or anything related to gender bending. The players start the game with their molly and the associated special ability, and then players are going to be drafting cards which represent different gestures, desires, and encounters that were frowned upon by the Society of the Reformation of Manners at that time, which, yes, was a real group. These cards will allow players to do things like host festivities or engage in all sorts of their wonderful vices, but of course at the risk of being arrested because all these activities were considered illegal at that time, and some of these activities might attract more attention than others, which of course comes with additional risk. In order to do all this, players are going to be using the action cards located out at the center of the board. These different cards work essentially like worker placement locations because players are going to be placing their pawns out on these cards in order to perform the major and minor actions of that card. But the nice thing about these being cards is that they can be swapped and changed throughout the game, which is something that will be happening round to round. But of course, depending on the action that you choose, you might be able to host those festivities that I mentioned before, like drag shows, masquerades, or many others. And you can also spend resources and cards from your hand in order to augment those experiences and make them even better. But another main action you'll find in this game is the action to go cruising. And there's various locations where you can go cruising on the board, with some of these locations having more police patrols than others. More police, of course, means more risk, but it also means more fun, and that is the main point of this game because players are trying to create joy. Players are trying to create their own personal joy, but they're also trying to create a shared joy for all of the mollies in the land. This, of course, increases your standing across the mollies and is going to open up other opportunities as you play throughout the game. And a really neat mechanism that comes along with the theme of sharing in this game is the way that the trading works, because players can trade resources and cards throughout this game, but players will also have access to different contract tokens, and they can use those to trade as well, which basically gives players an IOU or a promise of something in the future that must be binding. So if you trade with me and I give you that contract, you can call in that favor at any time that you want in order to do the action on that contract. A really cool mechanism here that I would love to see in more games. But as players are playing through this game and cycling through the rounds, there's going to be different events and actions that happen between the rounds, and this could trigger a roll of the arrest die. There are other things that can trigger this roll as well, depending on actions that players perform and the outcomes of those actions. And there are a bunch of different ways that players can get arrested, but anytime that you're rolling this arrest die, you're going to be checking on the round tracker and seeing what value you need to get below in order to not get arrested. If you do roll above that value and you are caught by the police, then you're going to have to draw as many arrest cards as equal to your current standing with the molly houses. Whenever you do this, you're going to have to pick the worst card that you drew and then activate that card. And these cards can come in a few different types. The best one to get are the acquitted cards, but then there is also the arrested cards. Then the worst one is the death cards, because this was a crime punishable by death, which is absolutely terrible, but it is part of the history, and that's why it's included in this game. But in addition to these three different types of cards, there is also a fourth one that you can optionally choose amongst the cards, which is to become an informer. And whenever you choose this card, you pretend like it was something else, but then your win condition is going to be changing and you're going to be trying to get the other mollies caught. Of course, like the other Whirligig games, this one does have a lot more complexities to it, and I'm just doing the broad strokes here to give you an idea of how it plays in a very short amount of time. But if you do want to learn more, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below, and of course you can click that notify me button in order to get notified once it launches.